The Divine Comedy, Book 1, Inferno, by Dante Alighieri. An Introduction to Inferno. The first part of the Divine Comedy, Inferno, takes readers on a harrowing journey through the depths of hell. Dante's vivid depictions of eternal torment offer not just a vision of divine justice, but a powerful allegory of human choices and the consequences they bring. What sets this translation of Inferno apart from others is its clear modern language that retains the full emotional and philosophical depth of Dante's original text. While previous translations often use archaic or complex phrasing, this version ensures that Dante's terrifying visions of sin and punishment are easily understood by today's readers, without losing any of the intensity of the imagery or the intricacies of Dante's moral lessons. Each circle of hell reveals another layer of human failure, whether through violence, deceit, or betrayal. And Dante's masterful balance of narrative and theological reflection shines through in this translation. Whether encountering Inferno for the first time or returning to it, readers will find this version both accessible and deeply resonant, allowing them to fully experience Dante's terrifying vision of justice.
Canto 1. Halfway through the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark forest, because the straight path had been lost. Oh, how hard it is to say what this wild, rough, and harsh forest was like. Just thinking about it renews my fear. It was so bitter that death feels hardly worse. But to speak of the good I found there, I will talk about the other things I saw. I can't clearly remember how I got there. I was so full of sleep at the moment, when I left the true path. But after I had reached the foot of a mountain, at the point where the valley ended, which had pierced my heart with fear, I looked up and saw its slopes, already bathed in the light of the planet that guides others straight on their way. Then the fear that had been deep in my heart all night long began to quiet down. That night I had passed with so much pity. And just like someone who, gasping for breath, gets out on the sea onto the shore and turns to look back at the dangerous waters, so my soul, still running away, turned around to see the pass, which no living person ever leaves. After I had rested my tired body, I began again to climb the deserted slope, always placing my firm foot lower. I had not gone far up the slope when I saw a leopard, light and swift, covered in a spotted coat. It did not move from before my path, but instead blocked my way, and so many times it made me turn back. It was still early morning, and the sun was rising with those stars that were with it when divine love first set them in motion, so that the hour of the day and the sweet season gave me hope of overcoming the beast with its spotted skin. But not so that I could avoid a lion that appeared before me. It came toward me with its head held high, with a hunger so fierce that the very air around it seemed afraid. And then a she-wolf so thin that it seemed filled with every desire, which had made many live in misery. She put such weight of fear upon me. With the sight of her I lost all hope of making it to the top of the hill. And as she pushed me back, I sank lower and lower. As I was falling back into the valley, before my eyes appeared one who seemed faint from long silence. When I saw him in that vast desert, I cried out to him, "Have mercy on me, whoever you are, whether a living man or a spirit." He answered me, "Not a man, though I once was. My parents were Lombards, both of them, and I was born in the city of Mantua. I lived under Julius, though late, and I saw Augustus's rule in the time of the false and lying gods. I was a poet, and I sang of that just man, and Caesar's son, who came from Troy, after proud Ilium was burned. But why do you return to do so? But why do you return to so much suffering? Why don't you climb the delightful mountain, which is the source and cause of all joy?" "Are you then Virgil the fountain, that pours forth so fast a river of speech?" I answered him with shame upon my brow. O glory and light of other poets, let me profit from the long study and great love that made me search through your works. You are my master and my guide. You alone are the one from whom I took the style that has brought me honour. See the beast that forced me to turn back. Help me, famous sage, for she makes my veins and pulse tremble. He said to me, You must take another path, if you wish to escape this savage place, for this beast that troubles you allows no one to pass her way. She kills and stops so many, and will continue to do so, until the greyhound comes to drive her away. He will not feed on wealth or power, but on wisdom, love, and virtue. He will be born between humble lands. He will be the salvation of that low Italy for which the maid Camilla died of her wounds, and Turnus, Nissus, and Euryalus too. He will chase her through every city until he has put her back in hell, where envy first let her loose. So for your sake I think and judge that you should follow me, and I will be your guide and lead you through an eternal place where you will hear the desperate cries and see the ancient spirits in pain, who all cry out for a second death. And you will see those who are content in the fire because they hope to come, wherever it may be, to join the blessed. If you wish to rise to these, there will be a soul more worthy than I who will guide you, and I will leave you with her when I depart, for the emperor who rules above, because I was rebellious to his law, wills not that I enter his city. In every part he reigns, and there he rules. There is his city and his lofty seat. Oh, happy are those he chooses. And I to him, Poet, I beg you, by that God you did not know, so that I may escape this evil, and worse, lead me to the place you spoke of, so that I may see St. Peter's gate, and those you call so sorrowful. And then he moved, and I followed behind him. Canto 2. The day was now departing, and the dark was taking from all living things on earth the work and weariness that filled their hearts. I, only I, was making ready to endure the struggle of the journey and of pity, of which memory shall never abandon. O Muses, O high genius, help me now. O memory who wrote down what I saw, here shall your nobility appear. I began, Poet, you who guide me, consider if I have the strength before you trust me to that deep passage. You say that Silvius's father, while still corrupt, went to the immortal world, and in his body did so with his senses. But if the enemy of every evil was kind to him, considering the great result that would arise from him, and who and what, it does not seem unworthy to a thoughtful man, for he was chosen in the highest heaven as the father of famous Rome and of her empire. Both were founded as a holy place, where the successor of the great Peter sits, for these things and for the journey he heard. He learned of things that were the cause of his victory, and of the papal mantle he would wear. Later, Paul, the chosen vessel, went there to bring us confirmation in the faith, which is the path to salvation. But why should I go there? Who allows it? I am not Aeneas, nor am I Paul. Neither I nor anyone would believe me worthy. So if I consent to come, I fear that my journey may be madness. You are wise and know much more than I can say. And as one who wills and then unwills, with new thoughts changing what he first intended, until he gives up what he began, so I did, with this dark forest on the plain, thinking over and over about the task, and with the courage I lacked to begin the journey. If I have well understood your words, replied the shade of that great soul, your spirit is struck with cowardice, which often encumbers men, turning them back from noble work, as false seeing turns a beast in flight. That you may be delivered from this fear, I will tell you why I came, and what I heard, at first when I began to feel pity for you. I was amongst those who are in suspense, when a lady so blessed and so fair, I prayed her to command, and I obeyed, called to me. Her eyes were shining, brighter than the star, and she spoke with the gentle voice of an angel. O courteous Mantuan spirit, whose fame endures in the world, and shall endure as long as the world lasts. My friend, who is not a friend of fortune, is so obstructed on his journey that he has turned his back in fear, and I am afraid he may be lost. I went to heaven for his sake, and I heard your name praised there. Will you not come to help him? I was born in, she said, in heaven. I am Beatrice, who calls you. I come from where I desire to return. Love moved me and makes me speak. When I am before my Lord, I will praise you often to him. Then she fell silent, and I began. O Lady of Virtue, you alone, through whom the human race exceeds all that is contained in the heavens, small is your command to one who obeys gladly as I do. You need only to tell me your will, but tell me the reason you do not fear to descend into this centre from that vast place you desire to return to. Since you want to know so deeply, I will explain this briefly, she replied. I fear nothing in his sight, for such grace has been granted to me by God that your misery cannot touch me. The only thing to be feared is the loss of love, that harm which leads souls astray. Now let's go, for his will is my will. He who sends me is already on high. Then she ceased to speak, and I replied, O holy and beautiful woman, who helps mankind in such misery, I thank you for your kindness and for the words you have given me. And now tell me what brings you here to descend into this dark valley. There is a noble lady in heaven who grieves at the plight of this man, and she has broken the strict law, sending me to help him. She called Lucia in her prayers, and said, Your faithful one now needs you. And Lucia went quickly to where I sat, with the ancient Rachel, and said, Beatrice, true praise of God, why don't you help him who loved you so much that he left the common crowd for you? Hearing her plea, I came to this place to bring him comfort and guide him through, for that this is what I must do. After she spoke to me in this way, she turned her shining eyes of joy, weeping, and I came to you, just as she wished. I freed you from the beast that blocked your path, that you may now safely pass. So what is it then? Why do you pause? Why do you hold such cowardice in your heart? Why are you not more daring and bold when three such blessed ladies care for you in heaven's court, and I myself give you so much hope? As little flowers, bent and closed by the chill of night, rise and bloom again when the sun touches them, so I too recovered my strength, and my heart was filled with courage as the fear melted away. And I said, O compassionate woman, who has come to my aid, and you who are courteous and quick to heed the truth of her words, through your words my heart now burns with such desire to go forth that I am ready for the journey. Lead me on, for we both share one will. You are my guide, my lord and teacher. And I set out on that deep and savage road. Canto 3. Through me you enter the city of woe. Through me you enter into eternal pain. Through me you enter among the lost. Justice moved my high maker. Divine power, highest wisdom, and first love created me. Before me nothing was created that was not eternal, and I endure eternally. Abandon all hope, you who enter here. These words, dark in colour, I saw inscribed above a gate. And I said, Master, their meaning is hard for me. And he, like one who understood, replied, Here all hesitation must be left behind. Here all cowardice must die. We have come to the place where I told you that you would see the sorrowful people who have lost the good of the intellect. Then, taking my hand in his, with a calm and reassuring expression, he led me into that hidden place. Here sighs and cries and shrill wails echoed through the starless night, so that I began to weep from the sound of them. Strange languages, horrible cries, words of pain, tones of anger, voices loud and hoarse, and the sounds of hands striking flesh made a tumult that swirled forever in the dark air like sand in a whirlwind. And I, my head bound in horror, said, Master, what is this that I hear, and who are those people so overcome by pain? And he answered me, This is the miserable condition of those wretched souls who lived without praise or blame. They are mixed with that cowardly crowd of angels who were not rebellious, but who were not faithful to God either, choosing only themselves. Heaven drove them out, not wanting to be less beautiful, and deep hell will not take them, because the wicked would feel some glory over them. And I said, Master, what is so grievous that makes them lament so deeply? He answered, I will tell you briefly. These have no hope of death, and so blind is their life that they envy every other fate. The world allows no mention of them. Mercy and justice despise them. Let us not speak of them. Look and pass on. And I, looking, saw a banner that, as it moved, seemed to race ahead, whirling around with no pause or rest. Behind it came such a long line of people that I would never have believed death had undone so many. After I recognized some of them, I saw and knew the shadow of him who in great cowardice made the great refusal. At once I understood, and I was sure that this was the worthless group both hated by God and his enemies. These miserable people, who had never truly lived, were naked and constantly stung by wasps and hornets that swarmed around them. Their faces streamed with blood, which mingled with their tears, and was gathered at their feet by disgusting worms. Then, looking further ahead, I saw a crowd upon the shore of a great river. At this I said, Master, now let me know, who are these people, and what drives them to seem so eager to cross that river, as I can see by the dim light? And he said to me, These things will be clear to you when we set foot upon the mournful shores of Acheron, the sad river. Then, with eyes cast down, fearing that my words had displeased him, I remained silent until we reached the river. And behold, coming toward us in a boat, an old man white with ancient hair, shouting, Woe to you, wicked souls! Do not hope to ever see heaven. I come to carry you to the other shore, into eternal darkness, to fire and ice. And you there, living soul, get away from these who are dead. But when he saw that I did not move, he said, By another way, by other harbours, you shall come to the shore, not by this path. A lighter boat must carry you. And my guide said to him, Charon, don't be angry. This is willed where what is willed must happen, and you can ask no more. At that, the woolly cheeks of the boatman who roams the livid marsh were stilled of their rage. For those naked, weary souls turned pale with fear, and they gnashed their teeth when they heard his cruel words. They cursed God, their parents, the human race, the place, the time, the seed of their conception and birth. Then all together, weeping loudly, they gathered on the evil shore that awaits every man who fears not God. Charon, the demon with burning eyes, beckoning to them, collects them all and strikes with his oar whoever lingers. As the leaves fall in autumn one after another until the branch sees all its fallen leaves upon the ground, so does Adam's evil seed throw themselves from that shore one by one at the signal like a bird to its lure. Thus they go over the dark water, and before they reach the farther shore, a new crowd gathers on this side. My son, said the courteous guide, those who die in the wrath of God, all come together here from every land, and they are eager to cross the river, because divine justice urges them on, so that fear is turned into desire. No good soul ever crosses this way. Therefore, if Charon complains about you, you now know the reason why. When he had finished speaking, the dark plain shook violently, so that the memory of my terror bathes me still in sweat. The tear-soaked earth gave out a wind that flashed a red light, which overwhelmed all my senses, and I fell like a man overcome by sleep. Canto 4. A heavy thunderclap broke the deep sleep in my head, and so I awoke like someone shaken and confused, rising suddenly. I turned my rested eyes in all directions, and I stood to see the place where I was. The valley of pain, so deep, so dark, so full of fog, made my sight unclear. Let us descend into the blind world below, the poet began, pale as death. I will go first, and you will follow. And I, who saw his pale face, asked, How can I go on if even you are afraid, you who are my comfort when I am doubtful? And he said to me, the anguish of these people below paints this look of pity on my face which you mistake for fear. Let us go, for the long journey urges us onwards. So he entered and made me enter the first circle that surrounds the abyss. Here, as far as I could hear, there were no cries of torment, only sighs that trembled through the eternal air, sighs of sorrow, not of pain. This came from the crowds of people, great in number, who were infants, women, and men together, many of them. The good master said to me, "You do not ask what souls are these you see. Before you go any further, I would have you know that they did not sin, and though they have merit, that is not enough, because they were not baptized, which is the gate to the faith that you follow. Because they lived before Christianity, or did not worship God rightly, they did not have the vision of God. I myself am one of these. For this defect and for no other fault, we are lost and only punished by our desire without hope." Great sorrow filled my heart when I heard this, because I knew people of great worth who were trapped in this limbo. "Tell me, Master, tell me, Lord," I began, wishing to be certain of the faith that overcomes all error. "Has anyone ever left this place, by his own merit or by another's, and gone to blessedness?" And he who understood my hidden meaning answered, "I was new to this condition when I saw a mighty one arrive, crowned with the sign of victory. He took the shade of our first father, Abel and Noah, Moses, obedient in law, Abraham the patriarch and David king, Israel his father and his sons, Rachel for whom he laboured so long, and many others, and made them blessed. And I would have you know that before them there were no human souls saved." We did not cease to go forward while he spoke, but passed through the wood, I say, of crowded spirits. We had not gone far from the top when I saw a fire that conquered a half circle of the dark. We were still a little distant from it, but close enough that I could see noble people held in that place. O you who honour both science and art, who are these souls that have such honour that it sets them apart from the rest? And he said to me, "The honoured names of these souls, which resound in your life above, win favour in heaven, and that is why they are treated differently here." Meanwhile I heard a voice say, "Honour the highest poet, his shade returns who had left us." And when the voice had stopped, I saw four great shades coming towards us, their faces neither sad nor happy. The good master began to speak. "Look and observe him who comes with the sword in his hand, leading the other three as their lord. That is Homer, the sovereign poet. The second is Horace, the satirist, and the third is Ovid, and the last is Lucan. Since all these share the same honour with me, they greet me, and so they do well." So I saw that great school of masters in the highest seat of poetry, which soars above all others, like an eagle in flight. After they had talked together for some time, they turned to me, nodding as if to say, "Come with us," and my master smiled. They honoured me greatly as they made me one of their group, so that I was the sixth among such intellect. We went forward, talking of things that are kept silent here. We came to the foot of a great castle encircled 7 times by high walls and protected by a beautiful stream. We passed over this as if it was solid ground. Through 7 gates I entered with these great sages, and we came to a meadow of fresh green grass. The people here had slow and grave eyes, and their faces were full of authority. They spoke little, and their voices were gentle. So we went inside to an open place, lit brightly and high, so that everyone there could be seen. Opposite, on the green enamel, was shown to me the great spirits, whom I still feel joy in remembering. I saw Electra with many companions, among whom I knew Hector and Aeneas, and Caesar armed with the shining eyes, and Camilla and Penthesilea. I saw on the other side, I saw the king of Latium sitting with Lavinia, his daughter, and Brutus who drove out Tarquinius, and Lucretia, Julia, Marcia, and Cornelia, and alone apart I saw the Saladin. When I raised my eyes a little higher, I saw the master of those who know, sitting with his students around him. I saw Plato and Socrates close by, and Democritus, who thought the world was chance, and Diogenes, and Anaxagoras, and Thales, Empedocles, Heraclitus, and Zeno, and I saw the one who wrote the Elements, Euclid and Ptolemy, Hippocrates, Avicenna and Galen, Averroes, the great commentator. I cannot tell all of them in full because my long theme urges me forward, and the word has already outgrown my power. The six companions divide in two. My wise guide leads me another way, out of the quiet into the trembling air, and I come to a place where there is no light. Canto 5. So I descended from the first circle into the second, smaller but more painful, where moans of suffering pierce the air. There Minos stands, grinning horribly, examining the sins of those who enter. He judges and sends them where he wills. I mean that when the ill-fated soul comes before him, it confesses everything, and that expert judge of sins determines the soul's place in hell. He wraps his tail around himself for as many times as the level he assigns. Always there are many souls in front of him. They go by turns, each confessing. They are judged and sent down. Say, you who enter here, called out Minos when he saw me. Look how you enter and whom you trust. Do not be deceived by the wide entrance. And my guide replied, why do you shout? Do not stop his destined journey. It is willed where what is willed must happen. That is enough. Now I begin to hear the notes of pain, the cries which have come to strike my ears. I have come to a place of every light silence, which roars like a stormy sea, where the winds of hell beat endlessly. The infernal hurricane, which never rests, sweeps these spirits onwards with its force, whirling and battering them. It torments them. When they come to the ruined slope, they cry out, moan, and curse the divine power that allows their torment. I understood that this was the torment of those condemned by carnal sins, who let reason be enslaved by desire. As the wings of starlings are lifted by the cold, and they form a crowded, sweeping flock, so are the spirits driven by that wind. They are brought here and there, up and down, with never any hope of relief, nor even of less pain. And like cranes flying through the sky, chanting their mournful songs, so did I see the spirits come, moaning and carried by the storm. I asked, Master, who are these people, lashed by the black wind? The first of those you want to know, he answered, was Empress of many tongues. She was so given over to vice that she made lust lawful in her code, and to take away the blame she had deserved. She is Semiramis, of whom we read that she succeeded Ninus as his wife. She ruled over the land of the Sultan. Next is Dido, who killed herself for love. And then comes Cleopatra, the lustful. You see Helen, for whom so long the years of ill rolled by, the great Achilles who fought to the end in love's battle. Paris is here, and Tristan, and more than 1,000 spirits he showed me with his finger, naming those that love had parted from life. When I heard my teacher call the names of such great ladies and knights, I was overcome with pity. I said, Poet, I would speak with those two who go together, and it seems so light upon the wind. He answered, You will see when they come nearer to us. Then beg them by the love that leads them, and they will come. Soon, as the wind brought them closer, I raised my voice. O weary spirits, come speak with us, if no one forbids it. As doves, called by desire, come through the air with wings outstretched, borne by the will to reach their nest, so did these two leave the flock, where Dido is, coming through the evil air, with such force their desire brought them to us. O gracious and kind-hearted soul, who visits us in this dark air, we who stained the world in blood, if the King of the universe were our friend, we would pray for your peace, because you pity our perverse fate. Whatever you want to hear or speak, we will hear and speak with you, as long as the wind stays quiet as it does now. The place where I was born lies on the shore where the Po falls into the sea with its followers. Love, which quickly catches a gentle heart, seized him for the beauty of my body, which was taken from me in a cruel way. Love, which pardons no one who is loved from loving in return, seized me so strongly with a desire for him that, as you see, it still does not leave me. Love led us both to one death. Cain waits for him who took our lives. These words were spoken to us by them. When I heard these tormented souls, I bowed my head and was so full of pity, I felt as I would die. Then I began, Francesca, your suffering brings me such grief and pity that I weep. But tell me, in the time of sweet sighs, how did love allow you to know such dangerous desires? And she said, there is no greater sorrow than to remember in misery the time when we were happy, and this your teacher knows. But if you so much wish to know the first root of our love, I will speak as one who weeps and speaks. One day, to pass the time, we read of Lancelot, how love bound him. We were alone and without any suspicion. Many times our eyes brought us together and changed the colour of our faces, but one moment alone defeated us. When we read that the desired smile was kissed by such a lover, he who shall never be parted from me, trembling all over, kissed my mouth. That book and its writer were our downfall. That day we read no more. While one of them spoke, the other wept, so that I fainted from pity as if I were dying, and I fell as a dead body falls. Canto 6. When my mind returned, which had closed with pity, for the two souls so sorrowful and confused, I see new torments in new tormented souls, wherever I move, wherever I turn, and wherever I look. I am in the third circle, the place of endless, cold rain, a heavy, cursed, and unchanging storm, with large hail, filthy water, and snow pouring through the dark air. The ground they fall upon is stinking mud. Cerberus, a cruel, monstrous beast, guards the circle with his three throats. He barks like a dog over the people lying there, exposing his teeth at them, and with his claws he tears them apart, skin and flesh. The rain makes them howl like dogs, and they turn from side to side, trying to protect themselves from the pain of the cold, dirty rain. When Cerberus saw us, he opened his mouth wide, showing us his fangs. But my guide bent down, scooped up some dirt, and threw it full into the three throats. Like a dog that barks for food and grows quiet once it eats, so did Cerberus quiet down from his ferocious barking. We passed over the shadow of the rains, and our feet touched their bodies that seemed to have no substance. They all lay on the ground, except one who sat up as soon as he saw us. He said to me, O you who are led through this hell, recognize me if you can. You were made before I was unmade. And I to him, your torment perhaps has taken your form from me, so that it doesn't seem like I've ever known you. But tell me, who are you, condemned to suffer in this painful rain? And he answered, your city, so full of envy that its cup runs over, held me once just as it holds you now. You, the citizens, called me Siacho for the damnable sin of gluttony. I am beaten by this rain, as you can see, and with no rest I waste away. But tell me if you know what has become of those in my city who have divided it in their fights. Are there any just men left, and what is their reason for their division? And I said, after much fighting, they will come to blood, and the countryside will drive out the side supported by the strongest. But the other side will fall within 3 years, and then the one who is rising now will prevail over the other with great force. They will keep their heads high for many years, oppressing the other side with heavy burdens, no matter how they weep. But tell me if you can, is there any just man among them? And tell me why so much discord. And I replied, there are very few who do what is right there, and envy, arrogance, and greed are the sparks that light the fire of their hearts. At this he gave a heavy sigh, and said, if you could see the suffering of those who lie down here, you would know more clearly what others do above. But when you are back to that sweet world, I pray you recall my name to men. I ask no more of you. Then he turned silent, and I said to him, I will do as you ask, but tell me how it is that these torments grow so bitter for these souls when judgment comes, or will they be less, or remain as they are? And he to me, return to your science, which teaches that as a thing gets more perfect, it feels more pain or joy. Although these cursed people will never be perfect, they will be closer then than now. And we passed the circle's filthy mire, moving slowly between the rain and the shadows that trembled from the pane. We spoke of more things than I can recount now, but when we came to the place where the path leads down, we found Plutus, the great enemy. Canto 7. Pape Satan, alla pape. Plutus began with his rough, hoarse voice, and the gentle sage who knew all things said to comfort me, "Do not let fear harm you, for no one can take our journey from us. He means to block our path, but in vain." Then he turned to the swollen face of the beast and said, "Be silent, cursed wolf. Let the fire inside devour you. Not without reason are we going down. It is willed on high where Michael took revenge on the proud rebellion. As sails puff up with wind, then fall in tangled heaps, where the mast snaps, so fell that cruel beast to the ground." We descended into the fourth pit, making our way along the dismal shore that holds all the evil of the universe. Ah, divine justice, who can pile up such new pains and punishments as I saw? Why do we suffer so much guilt? As always, I ask, "Tell me, master, what is this place? What torments can we find here?" And he to me, "You will see when you step a little further down, all this makes you ask too much." And I saw a multitude of people, rolling great weights with their chests. They met each other with terrible crashes, and then turned and rolled them back, shouting, "Why do you hoard, and why do you waste?" Then they turned again along their path, back to the other side, until they collided once more. And I, who felt my heart almost pierced, said, "Master, show me who these people are. Were they all priests or clerics?" And he to me, "These were souls so twisted in their minds when they lived that they spent no measure in their wealth. Clearly you can see it when you come near. Those who have hoarded have bald foreheads, and those who wasted are unshaven. In the world above they were blind, and in their miserliness or excess they lost all reason. Their noise and shouting shows their guilt clearly, and so they collide forever. Their fate drags them on through this circle without end, and they will never rise from the grave at judgment. The wicked will never grow more beautiful, but continue on in this misery." Then I asked, "Master, tell me more about Fortune. Who is this figure you spoke of, who seems to hold sway over all things?" And he to me, "O foolish creatures, how great is the ignorance that leads you astray! I want you to learn more about her. He whose wisdom transcends all things, created the heavens and gave them guides, so that every part would shine equally. He also gave a guide to the world's splendors, one who would transfer wealth from one people to another, from one family to another, according to hidden reasons. This guide is called Fortune, and she moves her riches according to law, so that no one can avoid her rule. This is why one nation flourishes and another falls, obeying her will, which is hidden like a snake in the grass. Your wisdom cannot oppose her. She moves, judges, and defends her reign, just like the other ministers who rule the heavens. Her wheel spins endlessly, bringing one man up and another down, and no one can resist her power. This is she, so often reviled, even by those who should praise her. They blame her unjustly, but she is blessed and does not hear them. She rejoices amongst the blessed and turns her wheel in joy." Then we descended to a deeper circle, to a place where we found greater pain, a place of wonders and of great wailing. There I saw a dreadful river, the river of Styx, and in the muddy, stinking waters a crowd of angry, naked souls. They struck and bit at each other, not with their hands alone, but with heads, chests, and feet, and tore each other to pieces. And my good master said, "These souls who struggle in the mud are those whom anger overcame. And I want you to know that beneath the water there are those who lie and sigh and make the water bubble at the surface. They say we were sullen in the sweet air that gladdens the sun, carrying within us the smoke of anger. Now we lie sullen here in the black mire. This hymn they gurgle in their throats, but they cannot speak it fully. So we made our way through the foul mixture of souls and mire, passing the edges of the swamp without touching the mud. Finally, we came to the foot of a tower." Canto 8. I say continuing that long before we reached the foot of the high tower, our eyes were drawn to two small flames at the top, and another answered from so far away it could hardly be seen. I turned to the sea of wisdom and asked, "What does this signal mean, and who answers it?" And he said to me, "Already you can see what is expected coming over the muddy water, if the mist of the swamp does not hide it from you." A bowstring never shot an arrow that ran so fast through the air as I now saw a small boat coming towards us across the water, driven by a single boatman, shouting, "Now you're caught, cursed soul!" "Phlegyas, Phlegyas," my master said, "this time you cry out in vain. We'll cross, but only to pass through the swamp." As one who hears of some great deception and then feels great anger within, so Phlegyas was enraged in his heart. My guide climbed into the boat first, then made me follow after him, and only when I was inside did the boat seem weighted down. As it moved forward over the water, an old soul covered in mud appeared before me, and said, "Who are you who come before your time?" And I said to him, "If I come, I do not stay. But who are you covered in so much filth?" He answers, "You see, I am one who weeps." And I said to him, "In weeping and sorrow stay, cursed soul, for I know you, filthy though you are." And then he reached out to grab the boat, but my master pushed him back, saying, "Away, down there, with the other dogs." And then he threw his arms around my neck, kissed my face, and said, "Blessed be she who bore you for your pride and virtue. In life that soul was full of arrogance, and no good ever warmed his heart. So his shadow here is filled with rage. And how many now above are kings who will lie here like pigs in mud, leaving behind only a hateful memory?" And I said, "Master, I would gladly see this soul plunge down into the mud before we leave this lake." And he said to me, "Before the shore comes near, you shall be satisfied with your desire." And just after this I saw such an attack made upon the wretched soul by those who were covered in mud, that I still give thanks and praise to God for it. All shouted at Filippo Argenti, and the angry soul of Florentine fury turned its teeth on itself. We left him behind, and I tell you no more, but in my ears a great cry of pain still sounded, and I bent my eyes forward. And my kind master said, "Now, my son, the city of Dis draws near, with its great crowds of citizens, and the heavy army of the damned." And I said, "Master, I already see the mosques that rise from the city, red as if they had just come out of the fire." And he said to me, "The eternal fire that burns within them makes them appear as they do in this lower hell." We came at last to the deep trenches that enclose the dismal city. The walls seemed to be made of iron. Not without first making a wide circle, we came finally to a place where the boatman with a loud voice said, "Get out, this is the entrance." Above the gates I saw more than 1,000 fallen angels who had rained down from heaven. They cried angrily, "Who is this that dares to come here alive?" My wise guide made a sign that he wished to speak with them in secret. And then they stopped their great contempt and said, "Come, but you alone, and let him be gone who was so daring as to come through this kingdom. Let him return alone by his foolish road, and try if he can, for you shall stay to lead him through this land so dark." Think, reader, of how I felt at that sound, for I did not believe I would return. "Oh, my dear guide, who has led me safely through so many dangers, do not leave me now," I cried. And he to me, "Do not be afraid, for no one can take us from this journey, but wait for me, and take heart and hope. I will not abandon you in this world." So he left and stayed there a long time. I waited in doubt and fear, and I could not hear what he told them. But they did not let him speak much longer. Instead, they rushed back inside and slammed the gates in my lord's face. He came back to me slowly, his eyes downcast and his steps heavy, like someone who must think hard about the road ahead. I felt great sorrow when I saw him, and my mind was filled with doubt. He said to me, "Who blocks the doors of the sorrowful Dis?" Then he said to me, "Take courage, for I will not leave you. We must win this fight. If not with force, then with intellect. I know this because someone has already come to help us, who was sent from heaven. Wait here and rest a while." I bowed my head in fear, and he stayed there, thinking. Canto 9. That cowardice which often weighs heavy on a man's heart and clouds his mind had filled me with fear from the sight of my guide turning back. But quickly the same words he spoke brought back some of my lost confidence. I stood still, watching carefully, for he stopped, listening intently, with anxious eyes towards the gate. Then he said to me, "Without a doubt, we must win this battle, or else," and stopped abruptly. Already on the filthy air I could see the coming of something fearful, like lightning flashes in the distance. Then from it every eye turned to me. He spoke then, quietly and sternly. "You see the Furies, full of rage, their ancient hands now stained with blood. They come to block our path." They were three, and all were women. They were covered in greenish snakes, with whips in their hands. They lashed themselves violently. They each had blood-soaked faces and wild, torn hair. When they saw us standing there, they screamed, "Call Medusa, we will turn him to stone, just as we did with Theseus." My master called out quickly, "Turn your eyes away and close them, for if you see her, you will be lost forever." Then he placed his hands over mine to shield me from the dreadful sight. And there came a loud crash of sound, like a violent thunderstorm sweeping the sea, raging through the forest and uprooting the trees, shaking and tearing them with its force. Dust clouds rose into the city, and the beasts and herds took flight. Then out of the dust a figure appeared, a man who seemed filled with divine power. With a firm hand he opened the gates, and his touch was light. "Go," he said to us, "away from this place, you who are cursed." Then, without a word, he turned and quickly left as soon as he had come. My guide and I moved forward, entering the city of Dis, now open before us. Within, I saw a wide plain filled with sorrow and misery, where flames burned through the darkness. Over all that plain there were tombs made of iron, and they were red hot with burning flames. The lids of these tombs were open, and from them rose terrible laments, more sorrowful than I had ever heard. I asked, "Master, who are these souls who suffer such torments?" And he answered me, "These are the arch-heretics, with all their followers who believe that the soul dies with the body. Their tombs are scattered everywhere, and they are more or less punished according to the severity of their errors." Then turning to the right, we passed between the walls and the tombs. Canto 10. Now my master walks the hidden path, between the walls of the city and the torments, and I follow closely behind him. "O supreme virtue," I began, "who leads me through these circles of sin, please speak to me when you can and satisfy my questions." And he said to me, "Speak as you wish, for I am prepared to answer." I replied, "Master, tell me about the people who lie in these tombs and who is inside them, with their lids wide open, showing such pain." And he said to me, "They are the heretics, and they are joined with their followers from every sect, all buried together. Some tombs are more crowded, others less so." Then, turning to the right, we passed between the walls and the tombs. And I said, "Master, may I see if anyone from this city lies within this place, people I may know?" And he to me, "Your request will soon be granted, for as we walk, one spirit will appear before you, who will reveal your wish." Suddenly from one of the tombs a voice rose, sharp and clear. "O Tuscan, passing through this city of fire, alive and speaking with such respect, please stop a while at this place. Your words show you are from my noble city, a place I too belonged." At that my master turned to me, saying, "Stop," and turned toward him. "He is calling you. See him." I could see him rising up from his coffin to his waist, his brow and chest clearly visible. And I walked closer to him, and he looked at me as if he despised me bitterly. Then he asked, "Who were your ancestors?" And I, who was eager to obey, hid nothing from him, and told him all he wanted to know. At that he raised his brows and said, "They were fierce opponents of mine, my ancestors, and of my party, so I exiled them twice." "If they were exiled, they returned," I answered him. "But yours have not learnt to do the same as well." Suddenly another figure rose beside him, barely visible from the tomb, only his head showing. He looked around as if he wanted to see if anyone else was with me, but when his hope seemed shattered, he said with tears, "If it is such great virtue to walk through hell, where is my son? Why is he not with you?" And I said to him, "I do not come here by my own will. He who waits leads me through this place. Perhaps your Guido felt contempt for such a task." His words already raised in me a sense of certainty, for I realized who he was, and at that I answered him clearly. Suddenly he rose up from his lying place in full view, and he cried, "What did you say? He felt contempt?" He was standing tall and firm, and I felt such fear inside me that I drew back toward my guide. And he, my master, said to me, "Turn around and look at him. He is Farinata, rising tall among the flames. See how he stands and despises them all." Then I approached him again, and he said, "If I have spoken wrongly, may you correct me in time." But suddenly he fell back into the flames, and I said to my master, "Tell me, why did he rise only to fall back so quickly?" And he replied to me, "When Judgment Day arrives, each soul will return to their burning grave and take back its flesh and bones and be forever trapped in suffering." And I, with my heart still full of fear, asked, "Master, tell me this. Will these torments be made greater when the final judgment comes, or will they remain the same?" And he said to me, "Return to your science, which teaches that as a thing gets closer to perfection, its pain will grow stronger. So even though these souls will never be truly perfected, they will be closer then and feel more pain." And then we passed along the path, and the city walls became dark again. Canto 11. Upon the edge of the high cliff formed a great circle of broken rocks. We came to a terrible place below. And there, to soften the awful stench that arose from the deep abyss, we stopped a while to rest, hidden behind a tomb. The tomb had an inscription saying, "I hold Pope Anastasius, whom Photinus led astray from the true way." "Our descent must wait a little," said my master, "until our sense adjusts to the foul smell below. So use this time to learn from me." I said to him, "Master, it would please me greatly if you would explain this circle and what sort of souls are imprisoned here. I would like to know more about it." And he to me, "Within these fallen walls there are 3 small circles, like those you have already passed through. Each is filled with souls accursed. But since you want to know the specifics, listen closely. In each of the smaller circles, different sins are punished. Those are the ones heaven hates the most: violence, fraud, and deceit. Fraud offends God the most because it betrays both love and trust, the virtues that bind humanity. So fraud receives the harshest punishment. Now violence is done in 3 ways: against God, oneself, or others. Against people and their belongings, death or ruin is the result. Against oneself, one may take their own life or waste their wealth and possessions. Against God, one can blaspheme or deny, despise nature or its gifts. The first circle of this lowest pit punishes all violent offenders, but since violence can take many forms, each must have its own special torment. Murderers and robbers, destroyers of homes and lives are in the first ring, all swimming in a river of boiling blood. Next to those who do violence to themselves, those who took their lives or wasted their fortunes. They are turned into trees and hunted by savage dogs. Then there are those who did violence to God, the blasphemers, the sodomites, the usurers, all in the third ring, wandering in the burning sand, and the fiery rain pours down forever. Now fraud is worse than violence, because it corrupts the human mind, and that is why it's punished more harshly. Fraud is divided into 2 parts. There is fraud that breaks the trust, that only harms someone once. Then there is treachery, where trust is completely broken. Therefore, the second circle of this lower hell is full of hypocrites, flatterers, and thieves, sorcerers, corrupt people, and tricksters, and all who deceive for their own gain. The final circle is for those who betray their family, their country, or their friends. Traitors are punished in the pit of hell. Now you understand the order of the world below, and why certain souls are punished more severely. And I said to him, Master, tell me, how does usury, it's either pronounced usury or usury, offend God and fall under the sin of violence? He said to me, if you listen to me closely, you will understand how usury offends. To late nature and its laws, God gave art as humanity's way to flourish and to sustain itself. By working according to the natural order, people create and sustain their wealth. But the usurer gains through violence. By lending at interest, they take from what should grow naturally. Now, let's go down the cliff. It is time to move forward. We made our way down the steep path, and I followed my guide closely, and the stench of the abyss became stronger. Canto 12. The place we came to was steep and rugged, and because of the rocky path we had to stop. The hillside was so terrible I shudder even now. It was like the ruins of a landslide that struck the Adige River near Trent, caused by an earthquake or some other force. As we moved down the shattered path, my guide said, "Look, the beast approaches. That will help us cross this circle." Suddenly I saw the Minotaur before us. He gnawed at himself in a rage, and when he saw us, he began to charge. My wise guide cried out to him, "Do you think you can stop us, you beast? Remember Theseus who struck you dead?" The beast was thrown into such confusion it fell, thrashing wildly. We moved quickly to the side, descending down the stony slope. I watched carefully as we walked, and saw the broken rocks beneath us, as if they had just been shattered. And I said to him, "Master, what caused this great destruction?" He replied, "Before I answer you, look below and see the river of blood that boils and burns those who commit violence. O blind rage, O mad desire that drives people in this mortal life and leads them to such an awful end." I turned my eyes down and saw a broad river that circles the plain. Between the banks, souls were boiling in blood. As we approached the river, a crowd of centaurs appeared, armed with arrows and chasing the souls. They saw us coming and stopped, and one of them, named Chiron, took an arrow and pulled back the string. My guide spoke to him, saying, "We have come with the will of heaven. Leave your anger and guide us across the river." Then Chiron turned and signaled another centaur, named Nessus, to lead us through the shallowest part and help us cross the boiling stream. As we crossed, I saw souls rising out of the blood as high as their necks, and Nessus explained, "These are tyrants who took innocent lives, and their punishment is to boil in the blood they spilled during their lives." I saw people like Alexander and Dionysus. Sorry, not Dionysus, Dionysius, and others who ruled with cruel hands. Farther down, I saw souls with only their heads above the blood, and Nessus said, "These are the souls of murderers who drowned their victims in blood." Finally, we came to a place where the river was shallow enough for us to cross. Nessus left us and returned to his group, and we continued forward on our journey. Canto 13. We entered the next circle, a dark, tangled forest filled with twisted trees. The leaves were black, the branches knotted, and there were no paths to follow. Screams and cries filled the air, but there were no souls to be seen. I stopped in confusion, wondering who was crying. My master said, "Break off a branch, and you will understand what torments them." I reached out and broke a branch from a nearby tree. Blood dripped from the wound, and the tree began to speak. "Why do you hurt me? Are you without pity? We were once human souls, but now we have become trees. If you had any heart, you would have left us alone." I stood still, full of pity, and my master said to the tree, "Tell him who you are, so that he may bring your memory back to the world." And the tree said, "I am Pierre de la Vigne, the trusted adviser of Emperor Frederick, but envy drove others to slander me, and I was thrown in prison. Despair overtook me, and I took my own life. Now I am condemned to this form, and I must suffer here as a tree. I said to him, Tell me, Pierre, if the punishment of the souls in this forest will continue after the final judgment. And the tree replied, When the final judgment comes, we will take back our bodies, but we will not wear them as before. Instead, our bodies will hang on these branches, a reminder of the lives we destroyed. We left the tortured souls behind and continued deeper into the forest. We came upon a group of souls chased by wild dogs, and as they ran, the dogs tore at their flesh. One of the souls fell to the ground, and the dogs ripped him to pieces. We left the gruesome sight behind and moved forward in silence. Canto 14. We emerged from the forest and came to a desolate plain covered in burning sand. Above, flames rained down like snow, setting the ground on fire. The souls of the plain cried out in agony. Some lay on the ground, some crouched down, and others wandered the burning sands. I asked my guide, Who are these souls suffering here? And he replied, These are the souls of those who committed violence against God. They blasphemed and denied him in life, and now they are condemned to suffer under this rain of fire. I saw one soul lying flat on the ground, and I asked my master, Who is that soul who seems so full of contempt? My master approached the soul and said, Tell us who you are, so that we may remember your name. The soul replied, I am Capanius, one of the 7 kings who lay siege to Thebes. Even in death I defy God, for he cannot break my spirit, though he punishes my body. My master turned to me and said, See how pride consumes this soul. Even in death he refuses to bend to God. We continued again across the burning plain and came to a small stream of red water. My master said, This is the river Lethe, which flows from the depths of hell and washes away the sins of those who cross it into the next life. We followed the river until we reached its source, a dark cave that led deeper into the abyss. Canto 15. We continued walking along the banks of the fiery river when suddenly a group of souls came into view. They were naked and their skin was burned by the flames that rained down from above. One of the souls looked at me and recognized me. He approached me and said, Is that truly you, Dante? I looked closely and saw that it was Brunetto Latini, my old mentor and friend. Master Brunetto, I cried, what has brought you to this place? He replied, I am here because of my sin, but it is a comfort to see you alive. You have not followed my path. You will rise to great heights while I must suffer here for eternity. I asked him, Tell me, Brunetto, what sin has brought you to this place? He replied, I sinned against nature, and now I must walk endlessly under this rain of fire. I said to him, I will remember you and honor your memory in my works. We continued walking together, talking of many things, until it was time for him to go. As he turned away, he said, Remember me, Dante, and keep my memory alive in the world. We left Brunetto behind and continued on our journey. Canto 16. Now I was in a place where the echoes of falling water could be heard, resounding through the circle of hell. We came to a narrow path that wound along the burning sand, and I saw 3 souls approaching us. They stopped in front of us and cried, Who are you, walking through this place unharmed by the fire and the burning sand? My master said to them, Wait here and I will answer. One of the souls stepped forward and said, We are not strangers to you. We were once proud and honored men, but now we are condemned to suffer here. I looked closer and recognized them. They were 3 famous Florentines, Jacopo Restitucci, Guido Guerra, and Ticahio Aldobrandi. I bowed my head in respect, and they said to me, If you come from our city, tell us how things are now. Is there still honor in Florence, or has the city fallen to shame? I said to them, Florence is filled with pride and corruption, and its people have turned against each other. I fear for the city's future. At these words they cried out in sorrow and said, "We thank you for your honesty, and we ask you to keep our memory alive when you return to the world above." I promised to remember them, and they turned away, walking back into the burning sand. We continued along the path, and soon the roar of falling water grew louder and louder. Finally, we reached the edge of a great cliff, and my master said to me, "This is the waterfall that flows into the eighth circle of hell." I looked down and saw a dark abyss, and the river plunging into it with great force. My master removed a cord from his waist and threw it into the abyss. I watched as it fell, and wondered what would happen next. Soon a dark figure rose from the depths, swimming up from the abyss, and I saw that it was a monstrous creature. My master said, "Behold the beast that will carry us down to the next circle." Canto 17. Behold the beast with the pointed tail, who crosses mountains, shatters walls, and spreads corruption through the world. Thus began my guide to describe the creature. Its face was the face of a just man, but the rest of its body was that of a serpent. It had 2 sharp claws and a back covered with colourful knots and circles. As the creature emerged from the abyss, it settled on the bank with its tail in the void, lashing it back and forth. My guide said to me, "We must now approach this beast carefully, be mindful of its deceitful ways." We walked down to where it lay, and I saw a group of souls sitting nearby on the burning sands, wiping their faces of the fire and ash. These were the usurers, who in life had used their wealth to exploit others for their own gain. Each one of them wore a purse around their neck, and on the purse was a symbol of the family they had belonged to. I looked at each soul and saw the emblems of noble families: a lion, a goose, a blue pig. I asked my guide who these souls were, and he answered, "These are the souls of those who lived off the labour of others, and now they must suffer for their greed." Then my master said to me, "Now it is time for us to go. Climb onto the back of this beast, for it will carry us down to the next circle." With some hesitation I climbed onto the creature's back, and my guide followed. The beast slowly backed over the edge of the cliff, and we began to descend into the abyss. It flew in wide circles, slowly spiraling down into the depths. I held on tightly, for the air was full of fear and shadows. I looked down and saw the next circle coming into view. At last we reached the bottom, and the beast landed gently on the dark ground below. We climbed off its back, and it flew away, disappearing into the darkness. Now we stood at the edge of the eighth circle of hell, where the souls of the fraudulent are punished for their deceit. Canto 18. There is a place in hell called Malebolge, made entirely of stone, with a dull grey colour, like the cliff we had just descended. Right in the middle of this evil plain there is a wide, deep well, and the walls around it are marked by 10 concentric circles of suffering. Like the fortifications that surround castles, or the moats that protect their walls, these circles are called bolges, and they form the ditches of the Malebolge. From the cliff where we stood, I could see the entrance to each bolgia and the bridges that connect them. We climbed down into the first bolgia, and there we found a crowd of souls walking in a long line. On one side they walked quickly, and on the other side they returned more slowly. They were naked, and their faces were full of torment and pain. They were whipped by demons who stood on both sides of the bolgia. The demons struck them hard with their whips, and the souls cried out in agony. I asked my guide, "Who are these souls who suffer such cruel punishment?" He replied, "These are the seducers, who used their charm to deceive others. They now run back and forth, chased and beaten by the demons." As I looked more closely, I recognized one of the souls. It was Jason, who had used his false promises to seduce Medea and abandon her. I watched him walk slowly back to the start of the bolgia, where the demons waited to strike him again. We left the first bolgia and crossed one of the bridges to the second ditch. Here I saw more souls, plunged in filth and covered in excrement. They were crying and groaning, beating their hands against the mud. I asked my guide, "Who are these souls who are forced to live in such filth?" He replied, "These are the flatterers who spread lies and false praise in life. Now they are condemned to wallow in this foul pit for eternity." As I watched, one of the souls stood up, covered in filth from head to toe. I recognized him as Lessio, a man who had used his words to manipulate and flatter others. He looked at me with shame in his eyes, then sank back into the filth. We continued on our path, crossing another bridge into the next Bolgia. Canto 8:19. O Simon Magus, O wretched followers, you who, rapiers for gold and silver, have prostituted the things of God, which should be the bridges of righteousness. Now it is fitting for you to be punished, for the third Bolgia is ready for you. We arrived at the next circle, and I looked down into the pit, where I saw the souls trapped in holes, their feet sticking out above the surface. The soles of their feet were on fire, and the flames flickered and burned, making their legs writhe in agony. I asked my guide, "Master, who are these souls who suffer so greatly, and why are they placed in such a way?" And he replied, "These are the Simonists, those who corrupted the church with their greed. They bought and sold sacred offices, turning the house of God into a market. Now they are punished in this way, trapped upside down, flames burning their feet, just as they were consumed by greed and life." As I walked further along the edge of the pit, I saw a soul whose feet burned more brightly than all the others. His legs writhed in such torment that it caught my attention. I asked my master, "Who is that soul, whose punishment seems worse than the rest?" And he replied, "That is Pope Nicholas III, who used his office to enrich himself and his family. He awaits the arrival of his successor, Pope Boniface VIII, who will take his place in this pit when he dies." I stepped closer to the burning soul and said, "Tell me, Pope Nicholas, what brought you to this place of torment?" He answered, "I am here because of my greed and corruption. I used my position in the church for my own gain, selling high holy offices to the highest bidder. Now I am condemned to suffer in this way, and I will remain here until my successor takes my place." As he spoke, I felt such anger rise in me that I could not hold back my words. I said to him, "Your greed has corrupted the church, and your sins have led you to this place of torment. May all those who follow in your footsteps suffer the same fate." With that, we left the third Bolgia and continued on our way. Canto 20. A new pain and torment I must tell, of the next circle of pitiful souls. Now I have reached the fourth Bolgia, where the weeping souls are punished. There I saw a crowd of spirits walking slowly in a circle, crying and weeping. But what a strange sight it was! Each of them had their heads turned backward, so that they walked forward but could only see behind them. Their tears ran down their backs, soaking their legs and bodies. I said to my guide, "Master, what is the reason these souls have been twisted like this, and who are they?" And he replied, "These are the fortune tellers and diviners, who tried to see the future and predict what was to come. In life they sought to look too far ahead, so now they are condemned to walk backward for all eternity. Their punishment reflects their sin. They wanted to look into the future, so now they can only see what lies behind them." I stood in awe and pity, watching the twisted souls. Among them I saw a figure I recognized from ancient stories. It was Tiresias, the famous prophet who was transformed from a man into a woman and then back into a man again. I also saw Arons, who lived in the mountains of Italy and watched the stars to predict the future. Next I saw Manto, the daughter of Tiresias, who wandered through many lands before founding the city of Mantua. My master pointed out each one, telling me their names and stories. As we moved further along the circle, I saw more souls twisted and turned, walking slowly and weeping. At last we left the miserable sight behind and continued on our journey. Canto 21. Now we come to the next Bolgia, where we saw even more cruel sights. In this circle the sinners are punished, with boiling pitch and burning tar. As we stood on the bridge overlooking the pit, I saw souls immersed in the thick black tar, their bodies hidden beneath the surface. Every so often one would try to rise, but the demons standing by the edge would strike them down with their hooks, pushing them back into the boiling pitch. I watched in horror as one soul tried to lift himself from the tar, only to be grabbed by a demon who tore at him with his claws. I said to my guide, "Master, who are these souls who suffer in this boiling pit?" And he replied, "These are the barrators, the corrupt officials who sold justice for personal gain. They took bribes and abused their power, and now they are punished in this boiling pitch, just as their actions in life were dark and sticky." As I watched, a group of demons appeared, carrying their weapons of torment. They swooped down on the souls and dragged them back into the boiling tar. One of the demons, seeing us standing there, approached us with a menacing grin. He said to my master, "What are you doing here, walking through this place of torment?" My master replied calmly, "Do not be concerned. We are here by divine will, and no harm shall come to us." The demon scowled, but stepped back, allowing us to continue on our way. We followed the path along the edge of the pit, careful to avoid the boiling pitch and the demons standing guard. As we walked, I saw more souls rise to the surface, only to be struck down again by the demon's cruel hooks. At last we reached the edge of the bulger and crossed the bridge into the next circle. Canto 22. I have seen in past war cavalry advance, charge, and retreat. I have seen armies encamp. I have seen sudden raids and battles, but I have never seen so strange a sight as the one I now witnessed in the dark depths of hell. We were walking along the edge of the boiling pitch, watching the souls suffer in their black torment, when suddenly a soul rose from the tar, trying to escape. Immediately one of the demons, quick as a hawk, darted down and seized him, dragging him back into the pit. The other demons gathered round, laughing and jeering, and one said, "Look who we caught. Let's hear what he has to say." They dragged the soul to the edge, still dripping with pitch, and demanded that he confess his sins. The soul, terrified, tried to speak, but could barely make a sound, for the boiling tar had choked him. My master turned to me and said, "Let us stay here a while, and listen to what he has to say. It may be of some use to you." Then one of the demons, known as Malakoda, raised his hand and said, "Speak quickly, wretch, or we will throw you back into the pitch." The soul, trembling with fear, said, "I was once a man of Navarre, in the service of King Thibault. I was a barrator, selling justice and taking bribes. Now I suffer for my sins in this boiling pit." At that, one of the demons sneered, "You won't escape from us, not unless you can fly." But the soul, desperate, tried to make a deal with the demons. He said, "If you spare me, I will show you where you can catch more souls hidden beneath the pitch." The demons, eager for more sport, agreed to let him go, and they all watched as the soul dove back into the pitch, hoping to escape their clutches. But as soon as he disappeared, the demons realized they had been tricked. The soul had fled deep into the boiling tar. There was no catching him now. Furious, the demons turned on each other, blaming one another for their failure. My master took the opportunity to hurry us from the scene, and we moved quickly to the next bulger, leaving the enraged demons behind. Canto 23. Silent, alone, and without company, we walked on, my guide and I, one following the other like a pair of monks, lost in thought on a lonely road. My mind was filled with fear as I remembered the rage of the demons we had just left behind. I feared they would come after us, and I turned to my guide and said, "Master, I fear those demons may pursue us. Let us hurry before they come." Just as I spoke, I saw them coming, flying towards us with fury and vengeance. My master, quick and wise, grabbed me and pulled me close, saying, "Run, run down the slope, for we must escape their wrath." We ran down the steep path, and soon we reached the next circle, where the demons dared not follow. Here I saw a new sight, souls walking slowly and heavily, covered in long cloaks made of lead. The cloaks were gilded on the outside, shining brightly like gold, but inside they were heavy and oppressive. These souls moved slowly, bent under the weight of their cloaks, sighing and weeping as they went. I said to my guide, "Who are these souls who are forced to wear such heavy cloaks?" And he replied, "These are the hypocrites who wore a false face in life, pretending to be righteous while hiding their sins within. Now they are punished with these heavy cloaks, beautiful on the outside, but burden on the inside, just as their lives were." As we were walking through the Bolgia, I saw two souls lying on the ground, crucified and nailed to the earth. The hypocrites walked over them, stepping on them as they passed. I asked my guide, "Who are these souls, who suffer even more than the others?" Then he replied, "These are Caiaphas and his followers, who conspired to crucify Christ. Now they are punished by lying in the same position as the cross, and they will remain here for eternity." We continued walking, and the sight of their torment filled me with sorrow. At last we reached the edge of the Bolgia and moved on to the next circle. Canto 24. In that season of the year, when the sun heats the earth more mildly, and the days grow longer, when the frost upon the ground seems like a white cloak over the fields, but melts away when the day warms, so that the farmer, troubled by his loss, rises early and looks out at his ruined crops, then takes his tools and goes back to the fields with new hope to begin his work, so did I feel as I watched my master lift his spirits again after that brief delay. We began our climb to the next Bolgia, and though the path was steep and difficult, we pressed on with determination. As we descended into the next circle, I heard strange sounds and cries, and the stench grew louder and stronger with each step. When we reached the bottom, I saw a terrible sight. The souls here were covered in snakes, coiled around their bodies and biting them. The snakes wrapped tightly around their necks and legs, making the souls writhe in agony. Suddenly, a snake bit one of the souls, and he immediately burst into flames, burning into ashes before my eyes. But as soon as he was consumed, the ashes reformed into the same soul, and he returned to his torment. I turned to my master and said, "Who are these souls, and why are they punished so cruelly?" And he replied, "These are the thieves, who stole the possessions of others in life. Now they are tormented by serpents, just as their thefts were sneaky and treacherous. And when they are bitten, they burn and are consumed, only to rise again, just as their crimes consumed them in life." As we watched, another soul was bitten by a snake, and he too was burned to ashes and then reformed. I stood in awe of the terrible sight, and my master said, "Let us move on, for there is much more to see." We walked through the Bolgia, watching the souls suffer their terrible fate, and at last we came to the next bridge that would lead us out of this circle. Canto 25. At the end of his words, the thief raised his hands with both fists, crying, "Take that, God, I aim them at you." From that moment on, the serpents were my friends, for one of them wrapped itself around his neck as if to say, "You will say no more." Another coiled around his arms and bound them tight, twisting its head through his face, as so that he could no longer move. O Pistoia, why do you not burn yourself to the ground, seeing as you exceed your wickedness in every way, even amongst hell's inhabitants? We left him behind and continued to the next group of souls, where a sight more strange than any I have told before awaited us. The souls here stood trembling in terror, watching as one of them was suddenly seized by a snake. It pierced him right where the neck meets the shoulders, then both of them burst into flames. Their forms began to melt together, merging and changing. The soul and the serpent became one, twisting and warping until they formed a hideous new shape. Then the soul turned into a serpent, and the serpent took the form of the man, slithering away on the ground, while the man stood in shock. The other soul stood in horror, silent and afraid of the transformation. I said to my master, "Have you ever seen anything so strange as this?" And he replied, "Rarely have I ever seen such a sight. And even in hell, this stands out as something terrible." We continued through the Bolgia, watching the souls of thieves meld with serpents and change form, one taking the shape of the other in a never-ending cycle of torment. At last we reached the edge of the Bolgia and crossed the bridge to the next circle. Canto 26. Rejoice, Florence, for you are so great that you spread your wings over land and sea, and even in hell your name is spoken. Among the thieves I found 5 of your citizens. Such distinguished names they have, that I am ashamed to honor you with them. But if our dreams come true, you will soon suffer what you deserve, and if that day comes sooner than later, it will not be too soon. We left the Bolgia, and I followed my guide along the rocky path that rises to the next circle. When we reached the top, I was filled with such sorrow that I must gather all my strength to tell what I saw next. We stood at the edge of the 8th Bolgia, and I saw countless flames, each one shining brightly in the darkness. Just as fireflies flicker in the fields on a warm summer night, so did these flames flicker at the depths of hell. I asked my guide, "What are these lights that I see dancing in the abyss?" And he replied, "Within each flame there is a soul, a sinner being punished for fraud, and just as they deceived others in life, they are now hidden by these flames." As I looked closer, I saw 2 flames moving together, and I asked, "Who are those 2 souls who are so closely bound?" And he said, "Those are Ulysses and Diomedes, who together committed great deceit. Now they are punished together in a single flame for the sins they committed in life." I asked my guide if I could speak to these 2 famous souls, and he said to me, "When they come near, you may ask them what you wish." When the flame came close enough, I called out to them, "O you who are in one flame, if my words hold any meaning, speak to me, I beg you." At that, the larger flame began to flicker, and the soul of Ulysses spoke. "When I left Circe, who had detained me for more than a year, not even the sweet sight of my son or the love of my wife could quench my thirst for adventure. So I set sail with my crew to explore the world and learn its secrets. We journeyed far beyond the known seas until we reached the edge of the world. There I spoke to my men and said, 'Do not deny yourselves the chance to experience the unknown. Remember your noble beginnings. We were not born to live like beasts, but to seek virtue and knowledge.' With these words I stirred their hearts to continue, and we sailed onward into the vast unknown. But soon we saw a great mountain in the distance, and from that mountain came a mighty storm that shattered our ships and dragged us into the depths of the sea. There my adventure ended, and I was consumed by the sea." When Ulysses finished speaking, the flame flickered and grew silent. We continued our journey, leaving behind the flames of the fraudulent, and crossing the bridge to the next Bolgia. Canto 27. The flame of Ulysses had gone on its way, and now another, more jagged flame approached, twisting and roaring. I watched it flicker, then I heard a voice from within, rising above the roar of the flame. "O you to whom I speak, who walks in hell alive, let it not disturb you if I speak too long. If you have just come from the land of Italy, where I was born, then let me hear if Romagna still lies in peace, or if it suffers from war." And I replied, "I come from that land, and your Romagna is neither at peace nor free from war. But I beg you, now tell me your name and your story, so that I may remember you when I return to the world above." The flame grew stronger, and the voice from within it spoke. If I thought that I was speaking to someone who could ever return to the world, I would reveal nothing, for fear of revealing my shame. But since no one ever returns from this abyss, I will speak without fear. I was a man of arms, then became a friar, hoping to make amends for my sins. But the prince of the Pharisees, who rules in Rome, called me back to serve his cause, and he led me back to sin. He asked me to use my skills to deceive and betray, to help him seize control of lands that did not belong to him. I gave him advice, but before I could confess my sin, I was taken by death and sent here to hell. Now I burn in this flame, punished for the lies and deceit that I spread in life." When he finished speaking, the flame grew quiet, and my guide said to me, "Let us leave this place, for we have heard enough." We moved on, crossing the bridge to the next Bolgia, where more tormented spirits awaited us. Canto 28. Who could ever describe the sight of blood and wounds I now behold? Every tongue would fail, every pen break to capture the horror I saw in this Bolgia. In the ninth Bolgia I saw the souls of those who caused division and discord. Their bodies were torn apart, split open and mutilated. Some walked with their heads severed, carrying them in their hands like lanterns. Others were cut in half, their guts spilling out as they walked. As they passed, their wounds would heal, only to be ripped open again by a demon who stood nearby, slicing them with his sword. I was overwhelmed by the sight, and I turned to my guide, saying, "Who are these souls so cruelly punished?" And he replied, "These are the sowers of discord, those who tore apart the bonds of peace and created division among people. In life they spread hatred and strife, and now they are torn apart, just as they tore others apart in life." As I watched, a soul came toward me, his body split from head to foot, his entrails spilling out as he walked. He looked at me with sorrowful eyes and said, "Look at my wounds and see how I suffer for my sin. I am Muhammad, who caused division in the world, and now I am punished for the discord I spread." Behind him came another soul, his face split in two, and he said, "I am Ali, who also caused division, and now I suffer with Muhammad." I stood in shock as another soul approached, carrying his severed head in his hands. He lifted it high so that it could speak to me. He said, "Look at this terrible punishment. I am Bertrand de Born, who incited rebellion against my king. In life I caused father and son to turn against each other, and now my own head is severed from my body as punishment for my crime." The sight of such suffering filled me with horror, and I could not bear to watch any longer. My guide said to me, "Let us leave this place, for we have seen enough." We quickly moved on, crossing the bridge to the next Bolgia, where even more tormented souls awaited us. Canto 29. Many people and their wounds had made my eyes so wet with pity that they longed to stay and weep. But Virgil said, "Why do you still look? Why do your eyes linger here? We must continue on, for the time is short." I followed him, but my heart was heavy as we walked along the edge of the Bolgia, looking down at the mutilated souls. As we crossed the bridge to the next Bolgia, I heard more cries of anguish and saw new sights of suffering. The 10th Bolgia was filled with souls afflicted with disease and decay. Their skin was covered in sores and blisters, and they lay on the ground writhing in agony. Some souls were bloated and swollen, their bodies so diseased that they could barely move. Others were thin and wasted, their bones sticking out through their sickly skin. The air was filled with the stench of decay, and the sights of these souls filled me with sorrow. I asked my guide, "Who are these souls so tormented by disease?" And he replied, "These are the falsifiers, those who corrupted the world with their lies and deceit. They spread falsehoods, just as their bodies now spread disease, and they are being punished by being consumed with sickness." As I watched, two souls began to fight, tearing at each other's flesh in a furious battle. One of them shouted, "Why do you attack me when we both suffer the same fate?" And the other replied, "I am angry because of your lies, for you deceived me in life, and now we both suffer here." Their fight ended in exhaustion, and they collapsed on the ground, their bodies ravaged by disease. I said to my guide, "Let us leave this place, for I can bear no more of this suffering." He agreed, and we quickly moved away, crossing the bridge to the next Bolgia. Canto 30. In the next circle we found souls suffering from madness. Their bodies were twisted and contorted, and they howled like wild animals, biting and scratching at themselves in fits of rage. I asked my guide, "Who are these souls so tormented by madness?" And he replied, "These are the falsifiers, the ones who falsified metals, people, coins, and words. They corrupted the truth in their lives, and now they are punished by losing their reason." As we walked through the Bolgia, I saw two souls, one covered in scabs, scratching himself with such fury that his skin was torn apart. He cried out in agony, "I am Mira, who falsified my father's love, deceiving him with lies and deceit. Now I suffer in this madness, consumed by the same fire that drove me to sin." The other soul was thin and pale, his body wasted by disease. He said, "I am Master Adam, who falsified coins, turning pure metal into fraud. For this I am condemned to suffer this burning thirst which can never be quenched. As we continued, I saw more souls consumed by madness, their bodies ravaged by their own hands. Some were tearing at their flesh, others biting their lips in fits of rage and despair. My guide said to me, "Let us leave this place, for we have seen enough of this madness." We crossed the bridge to the next Bolgia, where even more tormented souls awaited us. Canto 31. The journey through the dismal valley had left me exhausted and full of dread, but my heart urged me forward, for now we approached the final circles of hell. The night was dark and I could not see clearly, but I heard the sound of a loud, deep horn echoing through the murky air, like the call of a great beast. I strained my eyes to see what lay ahead, and as we moved forward I saw massive, towering shapes looming in the distance, like giants. I turned to my guide and asked, "Master, what are these enormous figures? Are they some kind of towers?" And he replied, "No, these are not towers. These are the giants who rebelled against the gods and were cast into hell for their ignorance and arrogance." As we moved closer, I saw the giants clearly, their immense forms chained to the ground. They stood at the edge of the pit, their massive bodies rising up from the dark abyss below. One of the giants, named Nimrod, stood before us, babbling in a language I could not understand. My guide said to me, "This is Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel. For his pride he was cursed with a language that no one can understand." We passed Nimrod and came to another giant, named Ephialtes, who had once tried to overthrow the gods. His hands were bound with heavy chains, and he struggled against his bonds with rage. We continued on until we reached the last giant, named Antaeus. Unlike the others, Antaeus was not bound, and he stood tall and free. My guide spoke to him and said, "Antaeus, we ask that you help us descend into the final circle of hell. We are sent here by divine will, and you have nothing to fear from us." Antaeus reached down with his massive hand and lifted us gently up, then lowered us into the dark abyss below. We descended into the final circle of hell, where the souls of the traitors are punished. Canto 32. If I had rhymes as rough and harsh as would suit this pit of sorrow, I would use them to describe the bottom of this abyss, for it is the darkest, coldest place in hell. But since I lack the power to fully capture this sight, I will do my best to tell the story of what I saw and heard. We had descended into the final circle of hell, and found ourselves in a frozen lake called Kokitos. The souls here were trapped in the ice, their bodies frozen solid with only their faces visible. They wept, and their tears froze on their cheeks, forming an icy mask of sorrow. As I looked around, I saw two souls so close together that their hair was tangled. They were butting their heads against each other in rage. I asked my guide, "Who are these souls, locked together in such hatred?" And he replied, "These are the traitors to their kin, those who betrayed their own families. Now they are condemned to spend eternity frozen in the ice, their hatred for one another burning even in the cold." We moved further across the frozen lake, and I saw more souls trapped in the ice, their faces twisted in agony. Some were laying flat on their backs, staring up at the icy sky, while others stood with their heads barely above the surface of the ice. As we continued, I saw a soul whose tears had frozen his eyes shut, sealing him in complete darkness. I asked my guide, "Who is this soul so consumed by his own sorrow?" And he replied, "This is Boccia del Tagliabati, a traitor to his country, who betrayed Florence and caused the defeat of his own people. Now he lies here, frozen in the ice, forever blind to the world around him." I bent down to speak to Boccia, but he refused to answer me, and I moved on, leaving him to his silent torment. At last we reached the center of the frozen lake, where the souls of the worst traitors are punished. Canto 33. The very center of this frozen lake is where the ultimate traitors lie. Here I saw two souls frozen together, one gnawing at the head of the other like a beast consuming its prey. I stood in shock at the sight and asked, who were these souls locked in such terrible fate? The one gnawing at the other's head raised his own and wiped his mouth on the hair of the one beneath him, then spoke to me, saying, I will tell you who I am and why I do this, but know that I am forever filled with hatred for this traitor. I am Count Ugolino, and this is Archbishop Ruggiero. In life we conspired together against Pisa, but Ruggiero betrayed me and locked me and my sons in a tower to starve. For many days we suffered in that cold, dark tower. I watched my children die, one by one, and in my despair I turned their bodies and devoured them. Now I am condemned to this fate, gnawing at the head of the one who betrayed me. As he finished speaking, he returned to his gruesome act, gnawing once more at Ruggiero's skull. I felt such sorrow by their fate, but my guide urged me onward, for there was still more to see. We continued walking across the ice and came to another group of souls, frozen so completely that only their faces were visible. Their heads were tilted backward and their eyes were sealed shut by the frozen tears that streamed down their faces. My guide said to me, these are the traitors to their guests, those who violated the bonds of hospitality. Now they lie frozen in this ice, their tears sealing their eyes shut forever. As we passed by, one of the souls called out to me, begging for help. He said, please, clear the ice from my eyes so that I may weep once more. Moved by his plea, I bent down and began to clear the ice, but as I did, he revealed his name to me. I am Friar Albergio, he said, who betrayed my guests and caused their deaths. Now I suffer here, but my body still lives in the world above, for hell has taken my soul even before my death. Horrified by his confession, I left the ice on his eyes and quickly moved away. We finally reached the edge of the frozen lake, where the greatest traitor of all awaited us. Canto 34. The banner of the King of Hell advance, my master said, and now you shall see the place where all hope dies forever. I looked ahead and saw the shadowy figure of a great, dark shape standing in the center of the frozen lake. I drew closer, trembling with fear, and saw the ultimate traitor, the one who betrayed the highest love, Lucifer, the fallen angel. He stood half buried in the ice, imprisoned in the very center of hell, his immense wings spread wide, flapping in a slow, mournful rhythm, creating the icy winds that froze the lake. Lucifer had 3 faces, one red, one yellow, and one black. Each face had its own mouth, and in each mouth he gnawed on a traitor for eternity. In the central mouth, Lucifer devoured Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Christ. Judas's body hung limp and broken, his head locked in the devil's jaws. In the other mouths, Lucifer gnawed on Brutus and Cassius, the 2 men who betrayed Julius Caesar. My guide said to me, behold the ultimate traitor, the one who turned against God and brought about his own fall. Now we must prepare to leave, for our journey through hell is at an end. We carefully climbed down Lucifer's body, using the tufts of his fur for support, and descended into the depths of the abyss. But as we continued, something strange happened. Suddenly we found ourselves climbing upward, as if the world had turned upside down. I was confused and asked my guide, Master, how is it that we are now climbing up when we were just descending? He replied, we have passed the center of the earth, and now we are climbing towards the surface of the world above. At last we reached a small opening and emerged from the darkness of hell into the clear night sky. We stood at the foot of Mount Purgatory, and I saw the stars shining brightly above. My guide said to me, we have now completed our journey through the Inferno. The way ahead leads to Purgatory, where souls are purified before they enter heaven. Let us rest now, for a new journey awaits us. And so we walked into the light, leaving behind the darkness of hell and looking upward to the stars.